The mists have been confirmed to be releasing on November the 21st, and so in this video, I'm going to go over what I think are going to be the top weapons and builds in them. Now, just a couple quick notes before we get started. First, I'm not going to go over every single weapon in the game. That would take way too long and most of them are not relevant, but I will include at least one weapon from every weapon line, so if you have a favorite weapon line, you at least have something you can look for. Second, I'm not going to include any of the new armors in my thoughts about what's going to be good. So the new armors might change things. We don't really know how much they're going to change the meta. So for example, bolt casters or something might become super strong solo weapons because of the new uninterruptible helmet thing. But it's going to take a while for them to circulate on the market, and we really don't know how they're going to shake things up. So I'm just not even really going to consider them in this list. Lastly, every weapon that lands in S or A tier of this tier list, I will be giving an example build for. You can check out the builds in the description, or I'll be going over them after I go through all the tier list of the weapons. Okay, so starting us off, we have the Arcane tree that I'm going to go over. Usually Arcanes aren't super good for open world PvP, so we have two Arcanes here. We have the Occult and the One-Hit Arcane. These are going to be your best options for Arcanes going into the Mists. Personally, I'd put these both pretty much in the C tier. They are playable. They're not going to be super strong, but they are definitely playable, and you can definitely have success with them if you get good at them. They're both pretty kitey based builds, and their damage isn't going to be super high, but they do bring a decent amount of utility from the Arcane tree to the table, so not bad options, but also not great options. Next, we have the Fire tree, also another weapon tree that is typically really bad in the open world, especially as a solo player. So typically, I would honestly almost even put these in D tier, but we'll have to see how good Fire is. Wildfire and One-Handed Fire are going to be your two best options. One-Handed Fire could actually be pretty good. It got buffed in the Mist patch, or it's going to get buffed in the Mist patch, and it's been looking pretty good on the private test server, so we'll see. Again, these are going to both go in C tier though. Fire as a weapon line, not much mobility, or actually no mobility at all, so it really struggles in the open world. You really have to rely on your opponents making mistakes to get kills and stuff like that, so it's not going to be great, but it's not completely worthless. They're definitely playable, but not something I would consider to be really strong in the Mists. Next, we have Holy Staves, and I actually think Holy Staves are going to be pretty good in the Mists. Despite the 20% healing nerfs, I think healing just in general for how the Mists are going to play out is still going to be extremely strong. So One-Hitted Holy is pretty much the best sort of solo PvP Holy build. You can see Corrupted Dungeons all the time, just proving its strength in healing reduced environments. So this is going right up into A tier. I think the One-Hitted Holy is going to be a strong option for the Mists. Got a great amount of healing, struggles for damage a little bit, but it's going to be really hard for people to kill you in that open world environment, and your ability to take like these 1v1v1 fights and stuff with a lot of self-healing is just going to be absolutely insane, so it's going to be a strong option in my opinion. Next, for Curse Staves. Curse Staves are sort of hit and miss for the open world, but the new Demonic Staff is actually quite good in the open world. Again, this is going to be another A tier option. Demonic could maybe go into B tier. Like Curse Staves again have no mobility, so you kind of rely on your opponents making mistakes. However, as we'll see in a little bit, Curse Staves typically have very good matchups into the types of solo builds that are run in the open world. So solo builds in the open world typically are run in a certain sort of way with like good amount of mobility and stuff, and the Curse Staff weapon line, and especially this Demonic Staff, as we'll see in a second, does extremely good against that type of playstyle, and so it's more of like a counter meta, but I think it's going to be extremely strong in the new Mists. Next, we have the Frost tree. Again, another mage weapon line that's just not good in the open world. It used to be a lot better pre-Frost changes, but right now I would just barely put this into the playable tier. It could maybe go into the viable one. Like Chill Howl is pretty decent in like the 1v1 PvP meta right now in like Corrupted Dungeons, but open world it'll probably struggle a little bit more than it does in Corrupted Dungeons, so I would probably put this in C tier. Maybe it could go in B with specific niche builds and matchups. We'll have to see with this one, but my prediction is that Frost in general is going to be pretty bad. Chill Howl will have some playability, definitely be able to win fights and stuff, but typically going to be outshined. At least that's my prediction for it. Moving on to the hunter weapon lines, we have nature staves, and similar to holy staves, again, I do think healing is going to be pretty strong, although I do think the one-handed holy is going to be a slightly better healing option than the nature staves, so I'm going to put these in B tier. Again, both of them, you can either run the druidic or the blight staff for this. Great nature, receiving some pretty heavy nerfs in the next patch, so it's probably not going to be super viable for the mists, more for like the 1vx style instead, but the blight and the druidic are both really solid options still for the nature, with the thorns and then the incredible amount of self-healing you have on the W's and E's. I think will make them quite strong options, very similar to the one-handed holy, but probably slightly worse. Next we have the Bloodletter, and this is going to be our first S tier and probably my prediction to be the single most insane weapon to run in the mist. Is probably going to be the single most popular weapon that you see being run in the mist, and probably going to be the best weapon that you run in the mists. Having a ton of mobility and an execute is just so good in the mist. For any sort of 1v1s, you can sort of do your burst combo and then try to get out. Any 1v1v1s or more people contesting an objective, you can easily just sort of rat kills and get out. It's going to be extremely strong, incredible mobility, one of the top 3 mobility weapons in the game. So you're always going to have an advantage over people chasing and escaping. It's got a decent amount of damage to execute. Again, I mean, it's just so good. It's got everything you want for the mists. There's going to be a ton of people running under Bloodletters. That's my prediction. It's going to be super strong. Quarterstaffs, again, used to be pretty good in the open world as a solo, but after the Quarterstaff changes and the IP changes, there's a lot of changes, but Quarterstaffs are no longer super good. Grail Seeker's pretty good in corrupted dungeons, or can be in some metas. I think it's right now. So this is going to go into the playable tier. Same with double-bladed staff. I want to keep both of these. So the Grail Seeker, if you're going to run Quarterstaff, Grail Seeker is more of like your fighting option. You do have a chance to kill some people with like a little sort of Demon Cave one-shot combo. You can be pretty successful in PvP, although that's more matchup specific, whereas the double-bladed is basically just going to be your worst version of the Bloodletter, sort of more ratty, really strong mobility, again one of the top 3 mobility weapons in the game, so you'll be able to chase and escape people pretty well, but the overall damage that you output with the double-bladed is just super low. You'll have to run some really high AP if you actually want to really sort of fight people. Moving on to spears, the one-handed spear, a channel classic. This is going to be in our A tier. One-handed spear is just always a super good option for solo PvP in the open world. The mists are going to be no exception. It's really general. It can fight all sorts of things. Tons of good W options. It can basically do whatever you need it to do. If you're good at the one-handed spear, you're going to have success on it. It's definitely a super strong option. Also for spears, if you want a slightly different playstyle and a different spear, the sort of Trinity spear style that works in corrupted dungeons should work okay in the open world as well. Trinity spear shouldn't be too bad. It will be slightly less versatile than the one-handed spear, so it goes in B tier instead of A tier. I think overall it's going to be worse than one-handed spear, but it can definitely still have some success, especially against a lot of sort of these more playable options, not like the top tier options. Another weapon that will be super strong in the mist is the Warbow. Again, just a classic sort of solo PvP open world build. Its ability to kite everything else nothing will be able to like successfully deal with this Warbow too well. Against a solo player, you can basically kite anything as Warbow, as we've seen in corrupted dungeons for a very long time now. It's your ultimate sort of kiting weapon. If you like that playstyle, Warbow is going to be extremely good in the mists for you. If you like bows but don't really like that Warbow style, you can also go with the Whispering Bow. This is going to be more of like a ganking weapon. It will struggle in a lot of matchups in like the head-to-head 1v1. It can definitely win some of them, but it's going to be pretty strong, I think, at like the sort of ganking aspect. That's super long range, outputs a lot of damage. You can't have a lot of success with the Whispering in those sort of like ganking the people trying to gather and stuff like that. The high damage, high range, it will be good in the open world. The Whispering sort of a niche open world bow, so you can definitely have success with that. Moving on to Wargloves options, we have a friend for the Bloodletter in the S tier in the Battle Bracers. The Battle Bracers are currently like the top option for solo open world PvP. They're just so good. They got great mobility, so again, you're going to have an advantage chasing and escaping. They're in that top 3 with the Bloodletter and the double-bladed staff, and they've got great damage. They can brawl things. They basically, again, have everything you would want in a solo open world PvP build. They're going to be the little bit more of a fighting option, whereas the Bloodletter is going to be a little bit more of like the execution, running away, sort of ratting style. But again, they're super good at basically everything. You can run, you can fight, you can chase. They got everything you want. They're going to definitely be super good in the mists. Another option to the Battle Bracers in the Wargloves is the Fists of Avalon. Very similar playstyle to the Battle Bracers, just slightly worse with that longer cooldown. They do have the Purge though. Against some specific matchups they could be a lot better. So if the meta is like really favoring needing a Purge or something, then you might see the Fists of Avalon sort of rise above the Battle Bracers and take their place in it, like swap places basically. But very similar playstyle, can also be really successful. I'm putting them B tier mostly because the Battle Bracers just sort of do their job better currently. Moving to the warrior weapon lines, now we have axes, starting with, let's start with Bear Paws. This is again going to be another A tier option. Bear Paws, again, one of the staples for solo open world PvP right now. In my prediction, they're not going to be quite as good as stuff like the Battle Bracers and the Bloodletter in the Mist specifically. I think they really benefit in the Black Zone. Their benefits really shine in the Black Zone, whereas in the Mist they won't be quite as good, but they're definitely still going to be an insanely strong option, just like they are right now. Definitely a solid A tier. The same build is going to work as the open world right now. They're just going to be really good. If you don't like the Bear Paws or want an axe player that doesn't want to spend like absurd amounts of money on buying a pair of Bear Paws, you can also go with the Battle Axe. Battle Axe is a pretty solid option for open world PvP for axes. I'm going to put this in either C tier or B tier. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think the Battle Axe is a little bit underrated for open world PvP right now, and I think the Mists are sort of the perfect environment to make it shine. So my prediction is the Battle Axe is actually going to be a pretty good option. Probably slightly worse than the Bear Paw, so we'll put it B tier, but I think you can definitely have a ton of success with a Battle Axe build in the open world in the Mists. Moving on to crossbows, my prediction is that crossbows, like always in the open world, are not going to be super strong. If you're going to go with the crossbow, I'd probably suggest going with the light crossbow. Bolt casters are an option, as I talked about sort of in the intro with the new armors might be good, but for now, we have to see how that goes. So for now, I think light crossbow is just going to be your best bet. Again, it's not going to be a super like strong option in the Mist, but it is definitely going to be playable. A lot more matchup specific than a lot of these other ones in like the S and the A tier, as it has no mobility. So if you get into a bad matchup, you're probably just going to die, but is definitely outputs a ton of damage and has some decent range. So it can be successful for sure in the new Mists. Moving on to swords. Swords are sort of solo PvP. Swords are more specialized for corrupted dungeons, it seems like, than they are for the open world. So things like Claymore are still going to be very strong in solo PvP, just like they are in the corrupted dungeons. However, not quite as good as they are in corrupted. So the Mist is going to struggle a little bit more. Definitely playable. These sort of swords like Claymore and Broadsword. Broadsword's getting a nerf, but so I'm thinking Claymore's probably going to be a little bit better. Definitely be a viable option, a playable option in the Mists. However, it's probably not going to be quite as good as something like the Carving Sword, something that has more mobility and sort of that more, can work around more different situations, a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more versatile than the Claymore. So Carving Sword I think is going to be your number one option for sword players. A viable option. I don't think swords are going to be particularly strong overall though in the Mists, just because again they're getting a little bit of nerf for the next patch, or in the Mist patch, and they're just, the lack of mobility is going to hurt them a little bit, which is why Carving is probably the best option of them. But again, still viable options, can do very well. For maces, we have the classic one-handed mace is like your solo PvP option for maces, and it's going to be viable. I don't think it's going to be a super strong option, but one-handed mace, despite all the nerfs that it got over the past year and stuff, it's still definitely a super strong option for solo PvP. Definitely underrated right now. Has two good W options, both for chasing and fighting. Definitely a viable option. It should be pretty good. Probably, it's sort of like these other S tier and A tier options, but probably just not quite as good, so it's viable. You can definitely have a ton of success with it, but not quite as good as your S's and A tiers. Lastly, we have hammers, another option that sort of struggled in the solo open world for a while. You sort of have two options. People usually run the Tomb Hammer in the open world. These are both going to go C tier. I mean, they're playable, but they're not going to be super strong. Tomb Hammer is the classic go-to. It's got really good range stun. You can sort of kite people, chase people around with it. Pole Hammer, or sorry, this is Great Hammer, is also going to be viable, I think, sort of similar to Tomb Hammer. They're very similar in terms of cooldown and stun duration, all that. I think the Great Hammer might become better in the Mist though, just because that extra mobility that it gets with its E might put it a little bit over the Tomb Hammer, but we'll have to see. Tomb Hammer is usually the choice, so I think they're both going to be playable, usable, they'll be alright, but again, definitely not super strong options as they lack a lot of damage as a solo player. Okay, so this is all the weapons that I think are going to be sort of like the ones to look for in the Mist, the ones to spec up. Again, there are some options that I haven't like put on here that would fit in like the A, B, C tier, or probably like the B and the C tier of like classically strong weapons lines, like daggers and spears. Like pike, for example, is obviously still going to be viable or playable in the Mist, and things like what did I miss here? Like daggers. I only put the Bloodletter on, but like the Death Givers are definitely going to be at least viable dagger pair, things like that. Classic solo weapon lines are going to have other ones in like the B's and the C tiers, but these are the top ones to look for, at least for every weapon line. So if you're looking to spec some stuff up before the Mists are released, I would suggest looking at this tier list and looking at a weapon that you'd like to play and choosing that one. Now, just to end off this video, I'm going to quickly look at our top 7 options here. So we have the Bloodletter and the Battle Bracers in our S tier, which I think are going to be the very best. And then A tier options, we have 5 of them: One-Handed Spear, Warbow, One-Handed Holy, Demonic, and Bear Paws. I'm just going to go over an example build for all of these. And again, builds will be in the description if you want to check them out. Okay, so starting off with our number 1 Bloodletter build is just going to be the classic Bloodletter build that's been run for 2 years plus. We got the Mage Cowl, Cleric Robes, Soldier Boots, Muizak, Bloodletter with poisons and damage food. Boots can be something other than soldier boots, like really any escape boots are going to work. I just chose soldier boots because they're sort of the general option. So Bionar work boots, for example, if you want more escapability, are going to be an option. And just the pure damage classic, get in, sort of burst your opponent down, and if it doesn't work, run away. Always have the option to run away with your mobility or just try to burst people down and execute them. So very classic Bloodletter build. This thing has been played to success for a very long time now. For the Battle Bracers, we're going to go with the classic open world build that's being run right now with the Fiend Cowl, Assassin Jacket, and again, Soldier Boots. Although this time on the Soldier Boots, you're going to want to run the Rejuvenating Sprint. Really, you can run any plate shoes, but Soldier Boots do have that option to Wanderlust in specific matchups. Again, Purge is going to be super helpful. Assassin Jacket is a staple solo open world PvP build. Deadwater Eel Stew, again, just gives you everything you need, and healing potions. You can switch out your potions for really whatever you prefer, but this is going to be your classic solo PvP build for the Battle Bracers. I don't think anything is really going to change from what they are right now. Moving on to the A tiers, we have the Bear Paw build. Again, you can just copy and paste the current sort of super good solo PvP build for the Bear Paws with the Fiend Cowl, Assassin Jacket, but then this time the Royal Sandals with Beef Stews. Just get a ton of damage amp on that E with your W on Adrenaline Boost here, and just boost up your E, making it do insane amounts of damage with the Poison Potions, with the Beef Stews, and you can really just shred people, dismount anybody you want, and fight super well. This is a classically super strong build. Again, it will work very well in the Mists. Next is the One-Handed Spear, and I'm sure you're happening to find a pattern at this point. Fiend Cowl and Assassin Jacket are going to be both extremely strong in solo builds, especially in the Mists. Assassin Jacket is just super good in the open world, and Fiend Cowl is basically needed if you want to actually kill anybody to purge their boots and stuff, especially killing like things that want to run away like gatherers, and it's just good in fights having that bop option and the purge option. These two are going to be a staple to really any solo build, so One-Handed Spear is no exception with this one. Again, Mist Collar and any leather shoes for Refreshing Sprint. The One-Handed Spear relies a little bit more on that cooldown reduction than some of the other builds, so you're going with the Mist Collar and the Refreshing Sprint, along again with some fighting, food, and potions with the Deadwater Eel. Really, you can go stews or omelets too with One-Handed Spear if you want, and then the healing potions. But again, super standard open world build for the One-Handed Spear. For the Warbow, we're going to see a little bit of a change in the helmet here. We're going to go with the Mage Cowl instead of the Fiend Cowl. Don't need the Purge quite as much on the Warbow, and sometimes you like the extra damage from the poison in certain matchups, although usually you're just going to stick to the Force Field or Bop ability, as kiting is everything on the Warbow. And again, for your boots, it's Rejuvenating Sprint, not the special ability. So Warbow is a super standard one. Kite a lot, got the healing potions to help you sustain a little bit. You can run resistance potions as well if you want, and then Deadwater Eel Stews, more damage, more cooldown. Classic Warbow kiting build, very common in even like corrupted dungeons. Moving on to the one-handed Holy build, this is probably the most unique of all of our top builds for the Mist because the one-handed Holy is a healing staff, so it's going to look a little bit different. There's a lot of helmet options. I went with the Guardian helmet because of the bear paws and the mage cowls on the Bloodletters and the curse stabs. It counters all of them, so probably be your best helmet option, although you do have other choices like Cleric cowl and stuff like that, along with Mage robe. That purge is super good on Holy staffs. You can also run Cleric robe. I think Mage robe is going to be slightly better. The Muzak just to get a little bit more, or the Mist collar to get a little bit more cooldown reduction, and again, just plate shoes. Normally you're going to run again on Rejuvenating Sprint for that little bit of extra healing, although I do like the Guardian boots on the Mist, or on the Holies specifically, in case you face any sort of like turret builds, you can swap to that Gigantify and have a little bit more defensiveness. With resistance potions, or healing potions I guess, but resistance are probably a little bit better, and amulets. Last but not least, we have the Demonic Staff. Again, we're going to go with the classic plate shoes, Rejuvenating Sprint with the Assassin Jacket. The helmet on the Demonic Staff can be a couple of things. I went with the Cleric cowl on this one. It's a classic one. You have the ice block for any sort of burst builds or things that you need to ice block, and then you can also switch to Bop on it. Both of them are super good options on this Demonic build. You can also, again, switch it for other things. If you don't want that option of Bop, you can go to like the Guardian helmet like we used on the One-Handed Holy. A lot of options for the helmet, but this is going to be the core of your build in the Rejuvenating Sprint, the Assassin Jacket Demonic with Deadwater Eel Stews and probably healing potions. It's just going to be a super strong sort of kiting, persistent damage build. Okay, and that is it. Those are going to be our top weapons for the Mists of Avalon, or my predictions for your top solo weapons on the Mists. I hope this video helped you find out what to spec before the November 21st Mists come out. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, do all the things to do to videos, and I will see you in the next one.